as their Director of Strategic Program in 2019. Charlie served as the founding president and CEO of the first Cristo Rey Network School in Florida, a college prep high school and corporate work study program for underserved youth in East Tampa. Charlie has served in several executive leadership roles on the various boards of directors in New York, New Jersey, Texas, and Florida. And before that, Charlie was a teacher, a coach, and a youth minister with teens and young adults. He's earned a bachelor's degree in Spanish with another major in Italian. They're pretty close, aren't they? I think. And from St. Joseph's College in Brooklyn, he has a master's in educational leadership from St. Mary's University in Texas, and an executive certificate in nonprofit leadership and management from Mendoza College of Business at the University of Notre Dame. He's been a CFRE, which is a certified fundraising executive, since 2012, and he's a fan of good food. I share that. Music and theater, both of those, and enjoys spending time in and on the water, which means that calling Tampa Bay home is a great place for a water lover to be. He strives to live his college motto, esse non videre, which is to be is not to seem to be. And so maybe we'll have some questions about both my Latin pronunciation and Charlie's motto and how that fits into his life afterwards. But a great pleasure to introduce Charlie Imbergamo this morning and learn a little bit about the Nonprofit Leadership Center. Charlie?
Ken, thank you so much for this wonderful introduction, and to all of you for permitting me the opportunity to be part of your convening today. And special thanks to Larry, whom I met, Larry, I guess it's about a year ago when we were still convening in person. Larry had come to some training up at the Nonprofit Leadership Center up on Northwest Shore in Tampa. So thanks so much for the invitation to be with you today. I'll share a little bit about the Nonprofit Leadership Center. I have a slide deck, and that could be a chunk of the time that we spend. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the Nonprofit Leadership Center, about my experience with the work that we're doing right now, or some of the high points, perhaps, or challenges that the nonprofit sector is facing at this point in the Tampa Bay area. So it's delightful to be with you here this afternoon and to learn and lunch together. We are at our core at the Nonprofit Leadership Center lifelong learners. And so we feel like we do best, and I'm just resizing things so I can continue to see you all. We feel like we do our best work in and among people. That's the slide that introduces me. Ken already did that. We do our best work in and with people, in groups of people who are committed to their own lifelong learning. We on the team of the Nonprofit Leadership Center, we are 6 full-time, well now 5, soon to be 6 when we bring on a new fellow to our team. We are 6 people who spend our full time working with and for the nonprofit sector to both connect, convene, and develop the sector in a number of frames of reference. Alongside us in our work, we have a number of great independent consultants and trainers who work with us, who support all of the programming that we do in the nonprofit arena. And Ken mentioned before that you have both for-profit and nonprofit organizations that are represented in the Dunedin Council of Organizations. We spend a lot of time working as well with for-profit organizations who not only help us, who invest in the work that we do, but also participate in our program, particularly as we look at sustainability for nonprofit organizations, because a number of the folks who work with our nonprofit organizations on boards represent the corporate community. We also do work within the government community because there are a number of governmental funders that also support the work that we do. But here's who we are at our core. We believe that the work of nonprofits positively affects change in society. We are all about capacity building. We are all about social impact in the community. We believe that knowledge that we have gained or you have gained and shared strengthens our collective leadership within the community, and we develop and connect nonprofit leaders to strengthen their individual organizations, but also to strengthen our community. Ken mentioned before about my time in and on the water. I must confess that when I moved to the Tampa Bay area in 2015, I was very intensely focused. I live in Pinellas County, along with most of you all. I work in Hillsborough County, but the work that brought me here was to found an organization way up in East Tampa, based upon where I reside right now. When I cycled out of executive work and began to direct strategy and programs for the Nonprofit Leadership Center, I had a little bit more time on my hands than I had previously when I was intensely focused as a founding executive director on founding the organization that I did here in the Tampa Bay area. So I spend a lot more time. I must confess that I never really spent a lot of time in Dunedin, but I do spend considerable amount of time in Dunedin now because, like a lot of other people, in COVID-19 in July, I bought a used boat and it is housed at Pirates Cove off of Bayshore, right there in Dunedin. So I'm there every weekend. I have the opportunity to, and I've been able to meander through various streets and learn about Dunedin and the pie place where I intend to get some pies, I think north of you in Palm Harbor for Thanksgiving. So anyway, it's a real treat to share the work that we do with you. Here's what we do. Our mission is, as I said, to develop and connect leaders to strengthen organizations. And we do that across 5 individual areas of excellence. And we run a number of classroom programs and other programs under each of these 5 areas of excellence. So the ones that we profess excellence in are board governance. That touches a lot of the work that we do. Fund development, critically important in today's day and age, particularly related to the challenges facing the nonprofit sector relative to revenue and resources related to COVID. Financial management, which is also critically important right now. It's all manner of financial management, accounting, financial management for boards who are exercising fiduciary responsibility to the organizations that they're serving, as well as scenario planning and budgeting, all critically important at this stage of the game in a lot of the situation in which organizations find themselves during the time of the pandemic. In leadership, and really leadership and management of organizations, and also in marketing and communications, particularly as it pertains to marketing and communicating organizational impact in the community to drive many of the other opportunities that organizations have by telling a compelling story in the community. So those are our 5 areas of excellence. We operate or operationalize those 5 areas of excellence in 4 modalities. Primarily, most of our time is spent in the classroom space. And that has taken on a different form in COVID-19. So we predominantly delivered our classrooms our classroom training in person, mostly in our Hillsborough classroom on Northwest Shore Boulevard and the towers at West Shore at 1408 Northwest Shore. However, we do operationalize some of that programming in satellite sites, and a number of those satellite sites are here in Pinellas County. So we do some of our programming down at the new Foundation for Healthy St. Pete Center for Health Equity. We will do some programming in the future at a new site of the Community Foundation of Tampa Bay in downtown St. Pete. We do considerable work at Collaborative Labs off of Almerton here in Mid-County, and considerable amount of work as well at the Juvenile Welfare Board, again, right here in Mid-County off of Almerton. So that's how our classroom work operates. We generally do anywhere between 80 and 90 classroom experiences each year across a range of topics that fall within those areas of excellence that I articulated a moment ago. In addition to our classroom training, we have done in the past 2 conferences. We've done a fall conference and a spring summer, which wound up to be this year fall leadership conference because we kept kicking it down the road because of the pandemic. Our fall conference in the past has been a smaller conference, which is related to senior leadership and board, focused on senior leadership and board topics. And then our spring or summer large leadership conference generally draws over 600 to 700 people. This year it drew nearly 1,000 people. It was virtual. And it happens, when it's in person, it happens in downtown Tampa. We have announced our date. I believe it's, if I'm remembering correctly, June 21st, 2021 for our big leadership conference. Big question mark over whether that will be in person or virtual again this year, depending on how the pandemic continues to unfold for us. But that's an opportunity for us to bring in a keynote speaker and to convene a much larger group of people around some breakout sessions. And it really does have a very motivating and positive effect on the community as a whole. And it draws an intersectionality of folks, largely nonprofit, but as well corporate and government and private foundation funders who come together to support the work of the nonprofit sector. We deliver programs in cohorts. So we have a number of cohorts that are running now. We have CEO Circle cohorts. We have 2 of those right now. Some of you may recognize the name because she's a native of Dunedin herself, Nancy Ridenour, who serves on our board at the Nonprofit Leadership Center. Nancy is the facilitator of one of our CEO Circles. We have 2 CEO Circles, and those are folks who have committed to come together in a cohort style to mastermind together problems that either they are facing as individual leaders or their organizations are facing. It's modeled on the for-profit Vistage process, which is basically like a roundtable mastermind conversation with leaders who come together to grapple with issues that are facing themselves as leaders or their organizations, as I mentioned. We have a new cohort that we have launched this year for emerging leaders. We will be finishing that cohort number 1 on December 8th. And we will have a second cohort of emerging leaders that we'll be working on seeding in the next few weeks. That's some collaborative work that we do with Florida Blue. That's a brand new cohort certificate program that we launched this past year. And that will have at least the second and third cohort. One of the things that's facing all organizations is succession planning. And one of the ways in which we chose to respond to supporting organizations in their succession planning is to do training and leadership development for emerging leaders who are identified by individual organizations as kind of potentially the next go-to people to serve in growing leadership positions within their organizations. And so essentially we exist to work on behalf of people who want to fund and catalyze change in the Nonprofit Leadership Center, to design and implement programs to help build that organizational capacity within our community. We also partner with the University of Tampa in a nonprofit leadership management certificate program, which has been a great, this is the 12th year in which we have participated with the University of Tampa in that cohort. That cohort has graduated anywhere between 12. This year it will graduate a number more, I think 17 folks in that cohort, who are trained with a university level certificate, and they can choose to continue to go on for master's degree credentialing at the university level. So that's a partnership that we have with the University of Tampa. We have some emerging work that some funders have some interest in continuing to grow and advance racial equity on nonprofit boards. And so one of the things, and we can talk about this a little bit, is one of the things that is really rather troubling as we look at the nonprofit sector as a whole, is that nonprofit boards are no more racially diverse 20 years later than they were 20 years ago. And so I did take the opportunity to peruse your YouTube channel and saw that you had a presentation on diversity from one of the professors at St. Pete College. And so it's really very important, as we continue to look at our sector, to realize that in both in named leadership positions within the nonprofit sector, but also in governing positions on the board, that persons of color are woefully underrepresented in those positions. And we are working with a number of funders at this point to try to catalyze some change in that area. So it's really exciting part of the cohort work that we are doing. So that's kind of a snapshot of how our programming works within cohorts that come together. And then finally, there's custom training that we use. We basically use our expertise, our areas of expertise, and our classroom training and presentations. Oftentimes what we find is that an organization will come and do board governance training. For instance, our board governance certificate program that we run twice a year will basically support 60 people to come out with a certificate in nonprofit governance. Oftentimes we find that some of those individual board members or executive directors will come to that program and then say, you know, we want additional board governance training and things like roles and responsibilities, or how to grow revenue capacity as a board member for your organization. And we will be engaged to do custom training to support organizations who have specific needs to move their organizational capacity within a particular area. So those are our 4 delivery models across our 5 areas of excellence. I present this, we are at nlctb.org, and our website is both rich with information, both about our programming, rich with information about resources that we have both during the time of COVID-19. We've developed a new resource page for race equity resources as well. And we have a whole host of resources that are developed around those 5 areas of excellence and expertise that we mentioned before. So I would direct you toward our Nonprofit Leadership Center website if you should have interest there. The one thing, I'm going to stop my screen share here for a second and let me just toggle over to a web page because I want to take you for a minute through our website to one area in particular. If you would like to continue to receive, if you don't receive information and you'd like to continue to receive information from the Nonprofit Leadership Center, I will direct you to, and it's loading up here. Can you see my screen? Yeah. Like to direct you to these two portions of our website. We've spent considerable amount of time this year providing free webinar resources for the nonprofit sector. And so if you were to go to our website and toggle on the bottom of our website on our on-demand web, this is all free resources in the community. These are webinars that we have done to support the nonprofit sector, including one recent webinar that we completed this week that will be uploaded to the site likely before the end of the day today on succession planning. So I invite you to toggle on any of these resources that might support either your interest or organizations that you're working with or boards that you may be serving on, because this is a real rich resource that was developed during the time of COVID-19 that we have found helps our organizations. The other thing that I'd like to bring to your attention is if you want to receive the Nonprofit Leadership Center's newsletter, and the newsletter is the communication tool that we use to communicate out all of the content, our trainings, including our free webinars that we're doing, you can go to the bottom of our website and click on this tab, which allows you to sign up for our newsletter. Once you sign up for it, you'll receive our newsletter. It comes out every Tuesday morning, and it's rich with programmatic opportunities for nonprofits and those who support nonprofits, as well as a lot of our resources that we put out into the community. So those are two opportunities. And then one final thing, oftentimes as a management service organization for the nonprofit sector, we have a lot of nonprofits who are seeking to expand their teams. And so I would draw your attention to our job board that lists all of the organizations that have chosen to post their job opportunities, nonprofit job opportunities, on our job board, as well for organizations that you might represent. We have a readership in our newsletter of nearly 6,000 people. And this is probably the second most hit tab on our website for those who are seeking employment within the nonprofit sector. So I direct your attention as well to that as a resource to help support the community. Okay, so enough of all of that. If you have any questions, specific questions for me regarding our work or some of what we are grappling with as we work with organizations in the nonprofit sector, I'm happy to entertain any of those. And then I'll be happy to turn the programming back to Ken for whatever comes next for you all today.
Excellent. Please, if you can make use of the chat function if you'd like to pose a question that way, or just raise your hand and we'll get you going in that way. Whatever works for you. I'd like to say that I'm a proud graduate of the UT program. That's in conjunction with the Nonprofit Leadership Center. I'm originally a University of Michigan Wolverine fan, so Michigan State, our big rivals are Spartans, so having to adjust to saying "Go Sparties" at the University of Tampa was a little difficult, but I made do, and it was a great opportunity. And in fact, as part of the program there, the Dunedin program at the Dunedin Fine Arts Center was one of our study areas. So it was valuable to me personally, but also to our organization. So that's another kind of byproduct, if you will, of that cohort. Let me see. We've got some questions here. Charlie, and you may see them, Charlie, what funding trends are you currently seeing? Any special programs or issues that funders are being drawn to?
Thank you for the question. Is it Dina who asked that question? Yeah.
Yeah, Dina and Peggy and Sean, they're all in one room up there.
Okay, there you go. There you go. Thank you all for the question. You know, in our training room, we say, if you know one funder, you know one funder. I think the answer to the question is as unique as the funder is. So one of the trends that we've seen is that, and it also depends on where in the 5-county area you are. One of the trends that we've seen in Pinellas County, for instance, I'll focus on some great work that I think has been done by organizations that are funded by the Juvenile Welfare Board. Juvenile Welfare Board, I think, really did a very good job at reaching out to their funded agencies and pivoting to whatever their funded agencies needed to do, kind of pivoting away from maybe some of the programmatic elements that were exclusively being funded and move towards some of the organizational elements in order to continue to have organizations stem the tide during COVID-19. I know that the Pinellas Community Foundation as well, if you want to treat yourself to the Pinellas Community Foundation's website, there's a series of additional resources that have been developed for recovery both in and from COVID-19. And so we were part on the Hillsborough side of some additional funding that was positioned through the Community Foundation of Tampa Bay for phase 2 Hillsborough County recovery dollars for people who are being impacted by COVID. So to answer your question, I think, and I can tell you from my fundraising experience, I think what we have found is many of the funders have reached out to organizations or organizations to funders to be really honest about the current state of affairs and what they're facing in order to continue to make those ends meet, so to speak. We found in the early days, now the recovery money is still out there through some of the county initiatives that we talked about and some of the community foundation initiatives. We found in the early days that a number of the organizations that in phase 1 and phase 2 of the PPP money that was available were able to achieve some of the stimulus money through the CARES Act and other stimulus money that was available to them. It also depends on whether or not they're human service organizations or social service organizations. They might continue to have some of that stimulus money that's coming either through federal grants or through the states. The organizations that we found that are most hard hit by where we are right now are the arts organizations. And I don't think that is represented by some of the folks on this call in terms of your depth of experience. You would have likely more experience than I in what that looks like. But I also will say that tremendous kudos to the arts organizations and those who support arts organizations who have hung on. There's a lot of innovative and creative work that's going on in the arts organizations to continue their programming, some of it free, some of it pivoted to virtual and paid programming. But kudos to a lot of the arts organizations that have pivoted. And I want to use that as an opportunity to pivot because I know there's another question in the chat about how we pivoted our programming. Let me tell you that I think the Nonprofit Leadership Center, the work that we did, the work that we do, and our pivot, there's that word that most of us cringe now when we hear, it is probably a case study in itself. we delivered 99.9% of our programming in person in our training room. And so really exclusively kind of person to person, peer to peer. I drew from my previous experience, along with other members of our team, in remote learning. You know, I came out of the schools, you know, private independent schools, faith-based schools, charter schools, and a lot of that in underserved populations. So you have two things going on that we felt we needed to straddle. How do we take the experience of developing and connecting in person around content and engagement and move that virtual? How do we do that among with and for a very wide differentiated group of users? How do we make that accessible to a differentiated group of users? And then how do we actually pivot the content and the programming to be meaningful and to have the level of engagement that we're having here? So we used Zoom platform, as you are right now. We found that we needed to probably condense in a 4-hour class, which is what most of our classes in the virtual programming space are 4 hours. We knew that we could cover less content. So we intentionally decided to cover less content and to make the content come alive in a way that we would use breakout rooms and other ways in which people would engage in what used to be table conversations in the breakout room space. So the other critical thing that we needed to do to pivot was to pivot our trainers and our independent consultants who also exclusively did things in person to the virtual space. So we took about 3 or 4 weeks after we went into our COVID. And I'm standing at my dining room table, which is where I've been standing for the last 8.5 months. We kind of hunkered down and we started to train our trainers in different ways to train and present virtually. And then we cast the net out and found that we surveyed our organizations, a lot of our high-level, high-flyer users, like, do you want to continue training? Do you have the ability to continue training? Do you have some capacity dollars to continue to train? We surveyed our funders to say, do you want us to continue this, albeit in a new way? And the response has been overwhelming: yes, yes, and yes. And I'll give you this as an example. One of the metrics that we use to track our impact in the community is the number of individual students that we serve in our programs, the number of people who attend, who sit in seats in our programming. Last year in 2019, we served 3,555 students in our programming. And I'm just looking right now, I'm peering over my shoulder here at our current dashboard of activity. So far this year, and the year is not over, we have served 4,077 students, which is 500 students more than we served last year, and the year isn't over. So what it tells me is that the work that we did to pivot met the need that was in the community. And to go to the previous conversation, those who fund us to do the work in the community continue to fund us and actually have increased the funding that we have now available to us to continue to do the work in the community so that we can subsidize our programming to continue to be affordable for those who participate in our programs.
I think that's also a great segue, kind of when you start talking about significant changes, maybe in membership-based organizations, which Ellen McHale asked about. Have you seen any significant changes in membership or with yourself and with other organizations?
Yeah, Alan, it's a great question. A little bit behind the curtain of how we work. We are not a membership-based organization. So for instance, you as individuals or organizations that you might represent do not have to have membership in the Nonprofit Leadership Center in order to participate in our programming. So we are an open enrollment program. So for us, we didn't have to grapple with how do we re-engage members, in a new way. I can tell you that tangentially, I've had a number of conversations with membership organizations, particularly on the training side, that didn't make the pivot as smoothly as we've made, and are struggling, I think, with engaging members for 2021, because especially now that we know that the effects of COVID are going to stretch into 2021, I think some other membership organizations haven't had the level of success that we have, because we have we charge a per engagement fee for the work that we do. So we don't have membership organizations and membership benefits per se. However, I think the challenge lies also on what the cost of membership is for membership organizations and what the benefits are. And that has affected the nonprofit sector, and it has affected the work of the nonprofit sector, including our own work, when we do things like sponsorship of a conference, or exhibitors, what used to be exhibitors at our in-person conference versus exhibitors in a virtual experience. The experience is very different. And so what we've done is, rather than focus on the price side of our programming, we've focused on the experience and on the value side of our programming. For instance, we were intending to have a conference in person. And so a sponsor would pay $1,500 to have a table of 10 people from their organization to come to the conference. We had already budgeted for that money, and a lot of those organizations had already paid their sponsorship, their membership, if you want, for that part of the programming. So the virtual space allowed us to just invite more people. So if somebody paid $1,500 for 10 people to participate in the event, we would say, invite 20 people to participate in the event, because the virtual platform has allowed us the opportunity to scale to impact more people without having to do a one-to-one transfer of cost. It didn't cost us any more to have more people participating in our virtual programming. So it gives us the opportunity to allow more people to participate in our programming because they need to. And the last thing that we would want to do at the Nonprofit Leadership Center is to say, if you have a need, there's no way that you can access what it is that we're doing. So I point back to our free webinars, which were catalyzed by someone wrote here, did we have to work with our trainers? Some of our trainers came up and be like, hey, Charlie, if you and your team can help me to figure out how I can train virtually, I'll do some pro bono training and I'll do a webinar for the community, and let's figure out how we do this. So in many ways, we learned how to do the new dance together. And I think it's, hashtag better together. Simon Sinek, wrote about this many years ago. We are in fact better together. And I think that's why we've landed where we've landed, in that we've kept everyone together, and people are getting what they need.
Excellent. Let me see. Hey, Alan, glad you were here. What a great resource the Nonprofit Leadership Center is for all of us within the community, and so glad that Charlie could be here today and kind of give us a basis of the things that are available. And as you can see, they're at every level, from free to shared to however whatever your needs, our needs might be as organizations. There's assistance for growth and stability with each other, which is what the Nonprofit Leadership Center is, of course, all about. If no one else has any questions, I'm not seeing any, so I would certainly like. Oh,
Ken, may I ask a question of the membership, if with your indulgence?
sure.
Are there specific, if you're in the nonprofit sector or working closely with nonprofits in your community, are there specific issues that you are encountering that you would want to share with us that we might be able to think about developing programming to help organizations that you may work in or with or be aware of? I'd be happy to know what they are, if you wanted to put them in the chat, or if you know, people could be unmuted or unmute themselves to talk about what those things might be.
Ken, may I say something?
Sure, Blair.
Okay, hi. Thank you so much, Charlie, for your presentation. And I've written a lot down, and I'm sure we'll get back to. To answer your question, it's a matter, in our view, of getting known in the community. And it's always a frustrating thing to run into people who I'll say, hey, have you been to the museum? Where's the museum? What's the museum? And many of these people actually live in Dunedin. And so we're going through a process of getting more people on the board and figuring out how to get this type of information out. But if you had anything, and I noticed that one of your 5 things is marketing. So we'll probably be contacting you to get your ideas, but you asked the question and I'm giving that to you right now. The other question I did have, though, was you talk about people being participants, not really members. And you talked about connectivity is one of your objectives, your mission. Do you have a list where if the museum, let's say, participated in a program, that we'd be able to contact somebody else to just talk about ideas in the community? Or do you not, want to go there?
No. First of all, Blair, thank you for your previous comment. Pleasure for me to be here and be part of this conversation, and happy to be a resource along with my team at the Nonprofit Leadership Center for whatever might be needed in the future. To the point that you just made, structurally, one of the ways that we connect people is that anyone who participates in one of our programs, let's say you came to the financial management series for board directors, and you came to know of other people, both in breakout session and in this format. Every one of our programs, and Larry could attest to this as a part of some of our recent programs, every one of our programs, after the program is over, there's a follow-up email with a registry of all of the people who participated with you in the program. So that it's not like, hey, in person, it's like, hey, I got to run. Here's my card. Give me a call. In the virtual space, it's, I knew her name was Margaret, but I don't remember her last name and I don't remember her organization. But I knew that something she said really captivated my attention of something they're doing, and I want to follow up. You get a roster of the name, the organization, the email address of those folks to communicate with thereafter, because we are committed to do what we do, but to give people resources after that so that you can continue to develop and connect amongst yourselves. You won't be surprised to know that one of the challenges is that, the biggest challenge in that is actually doing it. After you get the list. So you kind of get what you invest in. We've found that people who do choose to call a few people or reach out to a few people on that list really do maximize the benefit of their learning. It's what I call elongating the learning. All studies show, for those of us who are adults learners, all studies show that adults need to touch the learning a number of times more than just the initial insight that they've gotten in order for it to affect behavioral change, both within themselves or within the organization. I would venture to say the same is true with young people too, but young people can develop and transfer learning a lot more quickly sometimes because they don't have the same amount of experiences that we all have. So we have to acquire the learning and then continue to elongate the process of touching it. Think of how many conferences you've been to and you're like, yeah, where's the notes on that? Like, I've forgotten it. So both through the process of evaluating our programs and reconnecting people with that spreadsheet that you would get for all the people who participated in whatever program you did, we've found over years of experience, that's what helps people to keep it moving after the program is over.
Well, and on a really good point here, that's a great point to unfortunately end, which we're going to have to do here as we're running out of time. But perhaps, Charlie, you could share with us how we might, or anyone here who wants to elongate their learning curve on today's session, get in touch with you or reach out to you to with any more questions. I see some folks have chimed in with some subject matter potentiality for you. So
sure. So if you go, I'll direct you back to our webpage, and if you go to the About Us tab and you click on staff, this is our team. I'm here. You can email me here, or I will place my contact information in the chat right there. You can email me. We're not in the office. If you call and leave a message for me, it will direct to my email. But if you email me, that's the quickest route to get to me.
Seems like everyone is email has become more and more important these days.
Sure. Or you can look, I'm on LinkedIn, you know, I'm in all the places where you might be as well. So if you want to ping me any place, I'm not a digital native, but I'm pretty close. So if you get me somewhere technologically, I most certainly will get back to you and support in whatever way we can. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, Charlie,